lead prayer this morning?
October 3rd, chapters 2 Samuel, chapter 15.
We all do what we can, right? Sorry. Thank you for being understanding. Tara's got it.
And the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The prayer of St. Francis kind of fits what we're doing. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen.
Perfect. Kara, you were I was thinking of that same thing this morning. St. Francis was all over the internet. Yeah.
When I was in church, I looked at the wrong date. I don't know why I thought today was the 4th. So the 4th tomorrow is the Feast of St. Francis. Right. But I was reading all that and I thought, well, how apropos for today.
Yeah. And all the Catholic schools do their pet blessings today because they won't be there tomorrow.
Yeah, the church will be doing theirs
so they'll do it a little bit early. But you can bring your animal to church.
One of our old parishes, well, because it was a farming community, they brought their horses, they brought their llamas.
Wow. Oh, that would be awesome.
That would be awesome.
Oh, that would be so cool.
I heard a
It
deacon
was
say
just
everything
weird to
from
see these
elephants to
horses
birds.
start all lining up and then taken out. And
Cool. All right.
Father wasn't so sure.
Good morning.
We just prayed. Yeah, we just started.
I know. Just started. So, all
Righty. Nancy,
All right.
let's get the
All
show
right.
on the road.
Show on the road. Okay. Just to refresh our memories where we were back in chapter 14, Absalom is kind of attempting the start of a takeover or coup within the government, and we have the description of Absalom as being the Hollywood king, which brought. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. We have a guest today.
Yeah. Or a new member.
New member. Cheryl came down the hall, and evidently Mona knows Estella too. So we're in 2 Samuel 15. 2 Samuel 15. I'm so sorry. And
It should be 284.
You have the same.
same Bible. Okay.
Because all of a sudden I'm looking down and no, it's 332.
Yeah. All right. All right. Anyway, so, he was the Hollywood king and reminded us of King Saul ahead above everybody. And so that's kind of where we left off. And so if somebody would read 2 Samuel 15, 1 through 6, we'll start with that.
After this, Absalom got himself a chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way of the gate. And when any man had a suit to come before the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And when he said, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say to him, "See, your claims are good and right, but there is no man deputed by the king to hear you." Absalom said, moreover, "Oh, that I were judge in the land. Then every man with a suit or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice." And whenever a man came near to do obeisance to him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. Thus Absalom did to all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So if everybody's claims are good and right, is there not a second side? I mean, like everybody's going to win? Half of them can't be.
It's very political.
Oh, if only the king would appoint somebody.
What a jerk.
Sounds like he's saying the king's not, giving you guys justice.
And I also find it hard to believe that there wasn't somebody out there going back to the king. Every ruler has their little minion spies and saying, hey, David, this is what your son's doing, you know?
That's probably why they didn't.
No, that's true too.
His daddy's boy.
And Daddy's boy.
It's not just the king, it's my father.
So from this description, does it appear that Absalom is openly dividing the kingdom here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty blatant.
Certainly is.
Pretty blatant, though.
So, I mean, it's not so much that he's just, saying, everybody vote for me, right? He's kind of undermining David. But, so to me, it's not quite as open. He is being open about it and saying that maybe David's not doing his job by saying, it's rightfully so, and if there was somebody to hear your case, that would be important.
In that he's at a gate of the city, wouldn't David's men be there guarding the gates of the city so they would know? They would be able to report back to the king, hey, your son's doing this.
But I wonder if they did.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
unclear.
Well, if it's David's son, he must have his permission.
I don't know, it's pretty blatant, that's treasonous talk. That's not questionable.
Right, but when you're dealing with that kind of thing, you're an ant and two elephants are fighting,
Yeah,
and here's the young guy,
I'm
the
not
king
getting
is
involved.
old, he's letting it get away. We have a hard enough time saying, going and telling on, in our own society, don't be a tattletale.
yeah.
Isn't that the bedrock of most parenting to young children? But what kind of message is that sending?
Yeah.
And then you couple it with, who's gonna win? If I tell on Absalom and he wins, he'll kill me.
Yeah, it's in my head.
Besides, somebody else will tell David.
Oh, yeah, somebody
Kill
else
the
will do it.
messenger.
Yeah.
Or that, is David gonna take it out on me if I tell him?
What do you think about the horses there?
Oh, didn't we learn a long time ago, they weren't supposed to have chariots and horses? Way back.
Oh, yeah, way back in.
They weren't supposed, the king wasn't supposed to amass gold, wives, or horses.
Yeah, and if you want to refer back to that, I did look it up, and it's Deuteronomy 17:16. So,
Chapter 17, verse 16.
and my pages weren't sticking together.
So Absalom had the horses and not necessarily David, is that?
Well, I think probably both kings did, but he's openly displaying his
Yeah.
authority, in the chariots and things, and so, and David, David's in this stage of his life where he doesn't seem to be acting as much like the king as he used to act like the king. So, 17:16 says, and this is the 10 duties and responsibilities of the king. But he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord has said unto you, you shall henceforth return no more that way. And there's a whole bunch of other things that the king is not supposed to be doing. And when we started all this with David, remember David was very... He did read the law daily, like the kings were supposed to do. So David would be somewhat familiar with this, but whether he's passed that on to his protege, Absalom or not, I don't know. So,
Especially if he thought Amnon was gonna be his successor.
right. And then since then he's, kind of banished Absalom, so how much contact has he had to really groom him? And then also in Deuteronomy 20, verse 1, it says, when thou goest out to battle against thine enemies and seize horses and chariots and a people more than thou, be not afraid of them, for the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt.
Can
So
you remind me what that one was?
Deuteronomy 20, verse 1.
Thank you.
So here Absalom is kind of gathering his armies, and you know, David's maybe not quite as much with the Lord as he has been in the past, but here it's saying, you know, don't be afraid, God's gonna be with you, even though there's horses and chariots and all of that, so. Okay, I was just sharing with Tony that my printer's still downstairs and my computer's upstairs, and I left all my extra notes in the computer. So, okay. Any other thoughts?
Now, I'm sorry, I didn't write down where you said the kings are not to amass.
Horses, that's Deuteronomy 17:16, and the verses that follow that are the 10 things that are the responsibility of the king. So, go back and maybe review that and look at that. So, I was just checking my notes here from here. Okay. All right, any other thoughts on the first few verses there that we read? All right, if somebody would then read 2 Samuel 15:7 through 10.
After a period of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Allow me to go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. For while living in Geshur in Aram, your servant made this vow. If the Lord ever brings me back to Jerusalem, I will worship him in Hebron." The king wished him a safe journey, and he went off to Hebron. Then Absalom sent spies throughout the tribes of Israel to say, "When you hear the sound of the horn, declare Absalom king of Hebron." 200 men had accompanied Absalom from Jerusalem. They had even invited and went in good faith, knowing nothing of the plan. Absalom also sent to,
I think it's Ahithophel, I think.
Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, an invitation to come from his town, Gilo, for the sacrifices he was about to offer. So the conspiracy gained strength, and the people with Absalom increased in numbers.
Okay.
He's quite weaselly, isn't he?
So is it right that these people going toward Absalom didn't necessarily agree with him or want to do this, but he was making it appear that way?
That's what I understood
That's what I
it to
kind of
be.
got from it, but I wanted to
Because
make
they
sure.
said they did not know of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, if they didn't, obviously, it's implied that if they didn't know the plan, they wouldn't be going against David.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think too, Absalom is that storybook king, and he's sort of asserting himself by saying, well, if there was somebody here to hear your case,
Right.
and so people are going to begin to rally around him.
And he might be very charismatic too. If we don't, it doesn't say anything, but you kind of get that feeling maybe.
And also, he's the king's son. You don't say no at an invitation to somebody like that in the first place.
Right. And I think too, he may have had some very loyal followers at first, but it's just like anything else when you get into a crowd of people and all of a sudden somebody starts saying something. I kind of was thinking about what's going on over in Hong Kong, and all of a sudden the groups are just amassing, and there's just hundreds of thousands of people that seem to be gathering there. And it probably started out with a relatively small protest, and they were talking about how important the social media has been to gather that group in. And not that David has, in David's time we had social media, but the people in the area would say, well, Absalom was looking pretty good, maybe we better kind of go with him. And they know of David's transgressions, at least some of them do, probably. So, why is Hebron important? Where have we seen Hebron?
I actually looked this up outside of the ARC study, but Hebron is the burial place of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Jacob and Rebekah. And then for purposes of our study with David, Hebron was the first capital city that he originally used before he moved the capital to Jerusalem. So before Jerusalem was named the capital, this was the major city. And so he was anointed king of Judah there. And then Saul's commander Abner had crowned Saul's son there. That was Ishbaal, who was king of northern Israel. But then David defeats Ishbaal, so it basically brings all the tribes together at that point. So there's a lot of significant, I guess, history, but also spiritual history. So by the 8th year of his reign, he had all the tribes together, and then at that point he moves to Jerusalem. So if you look at that compared to now his son's going there, he had to defeat Saul and take over the kingdom. So maybe this is not just a strategic move land-wise, but it's also a sign that all these people that are gathering would know this history because it's within their lifetime. So they should see the signs, to me, that this is what he's doing. It's like, as David took the crown from Saul, I'm taking the crown from David. And now I'm the anointed one.
Further back,
Really
Jacob
good.
went to, when he was sent away to Laban, he was at Hebron when he said that if I come to my father's house in peace and I have, food and clothing and I'm protected, then I will come back here and to the stone that I've set up for a pillar and give you 1/10 of everything. So he's repeating the same thing Jacob's done at the same place.
Wow.
That is in Genesis 28:20.
Well, does it separate it, or signify a separation of the country again? Where prior to David healing the north and the south, it was a very distinct north and a very distinct south, and it seemed like he was announcing a separation again. I don't know.
Could be. Good conclusion there. Also, I think this, if I remember right, like I say, I left some of my notes at home, but I think this is the place where Abraham got his call.
Who?
Abraham.
Oh,
There's something to do with Abraham, and I can't remember if that's exactly where he got his call or not, so.
I have
So
a
Hebron
map
is
that
a
shows where they
very-
are.
Hebron is a very, very old city, one of the oldest cities in that part of the world, and so it wouldn't be surprising that it goes all the way back to Abram's day.
In Numbers, it says, and Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan of Egypt, whatever that
So-
means. So it's like before the Egyptian
Rules.
civilization too.
Yeah, so it's one of the oldest cities, or the oldest city, I can't remember exactly, but one of the oldest cities that's in that part of the world.
It says extra biblical sources say it's circa 1720 BC. It's pretty old.
I thought it was kind of interesting in those same verses there in around 15:10. It said, my Bible said something about David gave a blessing. I don't think whoever read that it was quite the same. But David kind of said, "Okay, Absalom, you have my blessing. Go ahead and go."
Yeah, mine
So
says,
it
wish
is-
him a safe journey.
Mine says go in peace.
Go in peace. Go in peace. And that's kind of sharp contrast, right? Because what's Absalom doing in verse 1? He's got horses and chariots and things, and David says,
Go in peace.
"Go."
With your war machine.
So I thought that was, to me, in some ways, is David unsuspecting that anything is going on with Absalom? Go in peace,
It's like,
Is
how
he
can you
just
be
really
clueless
blind?
and be the ruler?
And Absalom was born in Hebron too. Just one more thing.
Is that right?
about
Oh.
Hebron. Remember how David had some of his kids there, and then he moved and had the others.
15, kind of 10, 11 in there, okay. So I think it was kind of an interesting parallel right there. Go in peace, but we've got all these horses and chariots. Question number 3, 11 through 12 there, is Absalom a priest and allowed to make these sacrifices that were described there? What do you think?
Doesn't look like it.
It doesn't look like it, except David took on the role of priest, and during this era, was it sort of assumed that the king was now going to be a priest too?
Well, it seems like with David, though, God had clearly chosen him and anointed him. He had kind of a special deal, it seemed like. This guy's treacherous.
Taking it on
He's
himself.
going to go and pay his vow. He's just saying, I'm going to go pay my vow, and the next thing he's sacrificing, that's a different thing. Because you think there's a priest there, he's going to pay his vow too. So I don't know why he is suddenly sacrificing.
So Debbie said he's not what?
They're not Levites.
Okay, they're not Levites. What tribe are they from? Judah? Okay, so they're definitely not Levites. But when we talked about David in depth last year, I know some people weren't here last year, but what did we find out about David and his priesthood? He wasn't a Levitical priest, but he was a priest after the order
Of
of
Melchizedek. Oh, yeah.
So if David's a priest after the order of Melchizedek, okay, who, if you go way back,
It's not a priestly order by birth.
okay,
And so you don't get it through, my dad was a priest and I'm a priest, like Levitical priesthood. So that would mean Absalom did not get the order of Melchizedek, because it's not inherited. It's not an order that's inherited. Is that where you're going? Okay.
so,
That is amazing, Nancy. Thank you.
That was a good.
That was a great way
good.
to figure that out. I didn't think of that.
Thank you for reminding us
Yes.
about Melchizedek. I forgot.
okay, and if, let's see, what else? Okay.
So what happened to previous people who did sacrifices when they weren't supposed to?
Oh, good question. Anybody
There
remember?
were people, I mean, even touching the ark, you were zapped.
Yeah.
There were people who sacrificed.
It's a death
I
sentence.
can't remember the name of who, but remember somebody's sons had gone astray and they were taking sacrifices.
Kohar or
It was,
something?
Seems like
It was
somebody-
actually Aaron's sons, wasn't
Somebody
it? Aaron's
sacrificed
sons?
and got zapped.
And they
Well,
were-
it was, and also Samuel's, the priest during Samuel's time, what was his name? Is it
Eli.
Eli's sons. I don't know if they got zapped, but
Well, they all
died.
they all died.
Yeah.
You know, so they were definitely punished. So, kind of interesting here, though, that Absalom thinks that he can do everything that David can do. You know, so.
you know, in the Aquinas class that we're taking, he's teaching us about our end, which isn't our final. Doesn't mean our final end. It means the purpose for which we were born, and the law and how rigid the roles were back then. And looking at it from that view, God's trying to teach us what our end is, what our purpose is. And in the Old Testament, it's all divided by distinction and family line. And then in the New Testament, we are all priest, prophet, and king. You know, our end is renewed and rejoined back to before the fall through Jesus. So we can now all be priest, prophet, and king. But back then he says, no, you're broken and you haven't been saved yet. So Levites, you've all lost the ability to be fatherly priests to your family. Now the Levites are allowed to offer me sacrifice. So does that make sense?
It's very astute.
Well, I'm just
Here,
repeating. I'm just repeating what Father told us about the end. Yeah, we have a different teacher.
Oh,
Yeah.
you don't want it? Oh.
Okay. All right. So right through the end of this, I think Absalom is starting to, momentum is starting to build behind Absalom, and, things are going to start to fall apart here, I think. So, any other comments before we look at the next section here, 13 through 18? Okay, and somebody want to read that next section, 13 through 18?
Well, real quick, he sent for Ahithophel Gileonite, David's counselor. It doesn't really tell us for sure, and a conspiracy grew. It doesn't really tell us whether Ahithophel fell in with him or not, or does it?
Well, I was going to kind of save my comments on
Till later, okay.
to a little bit later.
that's great.
Okay, because I think it ties in a little bit later. Originally, I put the question, who is Ahithophel up there, and I think it will tie in better
Oh,
down,
I'm sorry, I
down
see it.
toward the.
Number
It's
9.
okay.
Yep.
No, it's okay. Good to keep the teacher in line here. Teacher, did I call myself the facilitator?
I love it.
Facilitator. All right. Any other comments at this point? Okay, 13 then, 13 through 18.
An informant came to David with a report. The Israelites have given their hearts to Absalom, and they are following him. At this, David said to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, "Get up, let us flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. Leave at once, or he will quickly overtake us and then bring disaster upon us and put the city to the sword." The king's servants answered him, "Whatever our lord the king chooses to do, we are your servants." Then the king set out, accompanied by his entire household except for 10 concubines, whom he left behind to care for the palace. As the king left the city, with all his officers accompanying him, they halted outside the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and at a distance, opposite the ascent of the Mount of Olives at a distance, while the whole army marched past him.
Okay. All right, so, before we specifically kind of talk about what's going on here, when you look at verses 13 through 18, how many times did you notice the word king or kings mentioned there?
I counted 4.
Yeah, I did
7?
too.
Well,
13 to
through
18.
20, if you include 21, it's a total of 7.
Okay.
And I think in the first 3 verses there, I think it was, maybe I miscounted myself, but I was thinking it was 3.
I thought it was 3 too.
And I guess it might depend on your translation
Oh,
too, whether
that's
they use
true.
king or lord.
Okay.
Oh, that's true.
Because I got
Okay.
4 and y'all might
Okay.
have 3.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have 3.
4.
That's still,
4.
Okay. I have king, in 15, I have king's servant set on to the king, and to do whatever soever my lord the king shall appoint. So,
Once in 15, once in 16, once in 17.
okay, so,
You've got 3 and 15, and I do as well.
so it
2
just,
and 16.
okay.
So this is RSV, and yours is?
Mine's King
King
James, and the commentary I was using, I don't remember what it was, so. But I thought it was interesting that, whether it's, you pick out the 3 or something there that, it's emphasizing the 3, the Trinity, the perfection, God's number, if it's 3 there, depending again on
Yeah.
translation.
Right.
And then, because I know that Arlene is tuned into the number 7.
she loves that.
There's 7 in that, those passages
And
there.
even if it isn't that exact number, the fact that they say it so many times in those few sentences when, he hasn't been acting kingly,
Right.
Right.
but these people are still loyal. And, I mean, as you'll see in the next section, where
Right.
even people who don't know him very well or just showed up into the kingdom are loyal to him.
But for anybody maybe who wasn't with us before, 7 is the same as the word Sabbath and oath. And David would have taken an oath or made a covenant relationship with his people to be a good king. He's in kinship with them, so he's supposed to be treating them like a father and taking care of them. So that's what comes out of that that word Savaoth or seven or covenant, depending on translation.
And David flees Jerusalem, it's 3 times, but the next part, David and Ithel, it's 7 times.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Okay. So I think they're trying, the author here is trying to emphasize that, David really is king. He may not be acting like king, but he really is king. And some people do recognize that he's still king. We may not be totally behind, I don't want to get too political here, but our president, but, we do recognize him as being our president,
Yeah.
and so.
Oh, excuse me, 4 times.
So-
well, even when you look at the church, there's periods of time where different preachers or priests or even popes have been pretty awful people, but you don't throw the church away because the leaders lack something. And I don't know of any leader of Israel that ever was the perfect leader, just like now, there's no perfect leader here.
But their personal failings didn't ever impact, they never changed church teaching or said that something that was good was bad or whatever. It was always a personal failing. It was unrelated. Their ministry was
Thank
still
goodness,
good.
yeah.
Well,
So,
isn't it like a priest? He's
Yeah.
a priest. A priest is a priest is a priest.
Right.
Has nothing to do with
and probably not.
anything else.
Anything else.
He's a sinful man like the rest of
Yeah.
He's a human being, but he's a priest. Nothing can change that.
Yeah, he could be a horrible.
the other ones.
Father, again, Wednesday night gave us an example of a priest can be the worst thing. He goes, I know this is stereotypical, but even a pedophile priest, his own personal evil does not affect his ability to perform the sacraments. Thank God, because none of us are worthy
Nobody would know if they were really
to be a
baptized
channel
or if
of
they-
grace. We're all a channel of grace, but none of us are worthy of that, and we don't claim it. He said if God gave you the ability to heal, it's not because he's making you better than anybody else. He's actually just using you as a channel for other people's perfection. So you can be the worst person in the world and still be a healer, but which is, thank goodness, or we wouldn't have a church. We wouldn't. How could God affect anything?
I think too that there are certain professions that are held to higher standards, and again, not to get political, but I think about what's been going on in Ferguson and the police officers there, and the police officers are obviously held to a much higher standard.
Mhm.
We expect them to be,
Yeah.
we expect them to be perfect. We
Yeah.
expect them to be able to make those quick decisions and not make the wrong quick decision. Yet,
Yeah.
and they're trained to try not to make the wrong decision,
Yeah.
but there are going to be times that it occurs. And I'm not saying that the police officer made the wrong decision at that time, because there's so much, there's so much stuff in the press that doesn't
It's so
specifically
political,
come
yeah,
out.
politicized. Yeah.
So, but again, being held to a higher standard here, so it's, and we're not perfect, and nor was David, nor was Absalom perfect, so, especially not David. So. But he's still a man after God's own heart.
Right,
Which we're
because
gonna,
God always did seem to pick the one who always did not feel very confident or was not, as we would say, called perfect. He I guess he just wanted to show that you don't have to be that way to profess what he wants you to do for him.
okay. So, how would you feel if you were one of the 10 concubines left behind?
Trade.
What was the purpose of that?
Yeah.
Well, it says in here to keep house.
I mean, come on.
But if Absalom's
Concubines
coming, you
are
think he's gonna keep
wives.
those concubines?
I mean, concubines
Right,
are women,
no,
are they not?
Absalom.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think that's just like, here's a peace offering, take them. Maybe I'll distract you for a while.
Remember, part of when countries were taken over, whoever took over the country got the king's wives, concubines or something. And so knowing that, I would But then I also think about, well, maybe David left those people, those concubines there, to keep house because he knew he was coming back. I don't know. But I would wonder how I would felt if,
Yeah.
David took
I would've been
20
afraid.
this way and left 10
Yeah.
here, or 200, or however many he
Yeah.
had.
This commentator says he left his concubines in the palace, and they will look after it for whomever the Lord chooses to be its master. Just,
Wow, that's a good way to look at it.
So they were a present to the next.
Or
Whoever was
or
gonna
if he
be the
returns
next.
it, they've kept everything in order.
Yeah.
So did he leave his best concubines
Yeah.
or his worst concubines?
Yeah.
Should we ask Steve? I don't know.
I think it's dumb, but I'm not stupid. Can I quote you on that? I was a good boy.
Good boy.
It's a running gag in the family.
No. I just think about the other gentleman. I think we might have run off because we were talking about circumcision.
Yes.
Oh, how funny. Anyway, so, I don't know. So I think in some ways, it depends on how you want to view this, but, he leaves some of them there to truly keep house, to make sure that everything is in order for him to return. He doesn't really want Jerusalem totally destroyed, I don't think. So, the other thing that was kind of brought to mind here was, what verse is it? I keep losing my place here. Back in verse 6, it says that Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And then down here, in the section that we just read, read something about hearts. Lost my place. Verse 13. And there came a messenger to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. So I don't know. Kind of.
No, I'm sorry again.
Verse 6 and 13. I just had noticed, it doesn't say hearts.
No, ours does
Mine
not.
does.
Transferred their loyalty.
Yeah.
In
said-
both 6 and 13.
Yeah.
That's because of the different.
Okay. But it says the same thing, though. It uses the same
Uses that
phrase,
phrase.
basically.
Yeah.
He stole the hearts of the men of Israel, and then in 13 it says the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. So, and I didn't research those verses, but that could, since it kind of bookends hearts there, could be a chiastic structure within the one that I sent you. It could be. I didn't research that, but it could be. So, anyway. So, all right. Any other comments through 18 there?
So would that make it its own little story?
It could.
7 through 12.
It could. And if you kind of look at the center of that, like I say, I didn't do the research on that, but somewhere around, between 6 and 13, somewhere around 9 would be the center, 9 or 10. It says, the king said unto him, go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. He stole the hearts, and he left and went to Hebron. I don't know if that's the important part of that or not. Where's Lynn when you need her, right? Okay. Let's take a look at 9 through 23, if somebody wants to look at that. – 19 through 23, I'm sorry. 19 through 23.
The king said to Ittai,
Sounds good?
Sounds good.
why should you also go with us? Go back and stay with the king, for you are a foreigner, and you too are an exile from your own country. You came only yesterday, and today shall I have you wander off with us wherever I have to go? Return and take your brothers with you, and may the Lord show you kindness and fidelity. But Ittai answered the king, as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, your servant shall be wherever my lord the king is, whether for death or for life. So the king said to Ittai, go then, march on. And Ittai the Hittite, with all his men and all the dependents that were with him, marched on. The whole land wept aloud as the last of the soldiers went by. And the king crossed the Wadi Kidron with all the soldiers moving on ahead of him by way of the ascent of the Mount of Olives toward the wilderness. That's sad. That's just sad.
It does sound sad, doesn't
Sounds
it?
very sad.
Why do you say it's sad?
Well, because they were like, just watching them all go by. I mean, here it was on the Mount of Olives, watching them all go past him out of Jerusalem into the wilderness.
Yeah, I found a reference that says the passing over this brook appears to have been viewed as a solemn abandonment. And then it says compare 1 Kings, several references in 2 Chronicles. So it said we read in 2 Chronicles we read that Asa burnt at the brook Kidron an abominable image for an Asherah, which Maacah his mother. It cuts it off, so I don't know what it's saying. Hezekiah, all the uncleanness that they found in the temple of Yahweh was carried by the Levites to the brook Kidron. So evidently it's had several different historical events occur there, but it's meaning David's officially abandoning the kingdom as they cross over. So he's the last one out.
Turn out the lights, right?
Kind of like the captain of
Like
the
the captain of
ships,
a
waiting
ship,
till
that's
everybody
exactly what I
else
was
is
thinking.
gone, and then
The last one to jump.
he crosses over the, so it may have been a symbolic border.
I'm very confused.
Okay.
Common thing. All the Chemarites and the Pelethites, 600 men of Gath, who accompanied him from that city, were passing with review before the king. He said to Ittai, who should go with us? Go back and stay with the king. But isn't that the king speaking?
Yeah.
So why are you going with us? Go back and stay with
Yeah.
me? Don't go with me, stay there with me?
He's
Is he
probably
the
referring,
Gittites
I think
king?
he's
The king of the
referring,
Gittites, maybe?
or,
Is he
Is
referring
he,
to Absalom?
is he, yeah?
I thought it
yeah.
was Absalom, but I don't
He's
know.
referring to Absalom, his
I
son.
didn't catch that, I just thought, you know.
That's one of the
That's a good-
questions,
that's
Mhm.
Since he'd been there one day, I was wondering if it was go back to your king and Gittite. I don't know.
it
Do
could
you see
be,
why I'm confused?
yeah.
Well, that's why I put the question in there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, it
Because,
could mean he's saying go back
because
to
it
his
is,
own kingdom.
it is,
Yeah.
it is. You know, and so, in reading some of the commentaries, it said that, maybe David was referring to Absalom. You know, that this is somebody that's, and it doesn't necessarily mean that he just arrived yesterday, 24 hours ago, but in the recent past. And so, maybe you should be following Absalom, because he's the one that has been acting as king. It could be referring to going back to where he came from, possibly. I think in a lot of ways, though, it's David kind of saying, everybody's leaving. I'm kind of not being looked at the king as the king anymore. It's like Carol says, it's kind of very sad. He came into Jerusalem, I think, with kind of some pomp and circumstance and bringing the ark in and things, and now take a look at where he is.
And he knows he's done it to himself.
Yeah, when your own son turns on you, it's pretty sad.
So, I don't know. Ittai is actually from Gath area, according to some of the commentaries that I read, which means that it would be the Philistines. And if you think back to David, where did he spend some of his time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, fought the Philistines, but
But he
didn't
was also their ally for a bit.
he went to Gath and kind of took refuge there. So,
And they thought that he was fighting against his own people, not
But
the
he was,
Philistines.
yeah. He was kind of
Because he was killing everybody.
a double spy, yeah.
So I think it's kind of interesting. So I think it's also reinforcement that, you know, Ittai says that, or David says, you know, go and be with your king, and Ittai says, yeah, but I am. I'm with you. I respect you as being the king. So he's giving David a vote of confidence here, I think. And in looking at this, it kind of goes back to also this verse 21 is part of the series of verses. If you count all the numbers of the times Kings is mentioned, it's mentioned 7 times. So it goes back to what Michelle was sharing with us about the covenant type relationship, that David is really Yahweh's, God's king. And, you know, is this helping us to recognize that David is still being respected by Yahweh. He may not be respected by his fellow countrymen,
But he was slowly anointed.
he is still the one that's
So-
been anointed by God.
Ittai is not a Hebrew. He's not of the tribes.
He's a
He's a-
Philistine.
He's a Philistine. So if you pull back from that, like from the worldview, the kingdom that God has established through David does not recognize him as king, even though the outside world can plainly see it. So this is a family, a broken family. But the rest of the world still can easily view David as the anointed one.
Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
You know, look at the
Yeah.
Jewish society.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, doesn't this remind us of the language in Ruth, where you go, I will go, you know, your people will be my people.
Oh, yeah.
And
Wonderful.
so,
Yeah.
and then that was all about covenant, you know, there between
Mhm.
Naomi and Ruth. So that's why I'm thinking more about covenant, because this language is so close to,
Mhm.
it's Ruth 1:16 or 3:13, 2 good places.
Covenant language, I like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. I didn't think about that one. It's good. That's why we all need to be here. That's why people that are here are the God appointed to be here, so.
Just 1:16, but Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. So, you know, he's saying, you know, whether for life or death, where the king shall be, there your servant will be. Just sounds so
Very
so
parallel.
close.
Oh, very parallel. Okay. So they cross over the river here, which puts them actually into the Transjordan tribe area. So remember when the land was first given, most of the settlement was being given to the tribes on one side of the river, and then the Manasseh tribes were to the other side.
Mhm.
And they said that they could have that land, but remember, you're supposed to help fight with us
Uh-huh.
if we, you know, if we need you. Okay, so he's crossing back over into this Transjordan area, which there's a little bit of controversy of whether this was really part of the covenant land. So, and David's been here before. David's been in this area before, because when we talk about the Kidron Valley, it's my understanding that's the wilderness where David was when he was being pursued by Saul. So during that time that David was being pursued by Saul, and he was hiding out in the wilderness there, what was Yahweh doing to David?
Testing.
Testing and
Like all the
preparing.
time we go into the desert and the Mount of Olives, it's such a sad saga, but isn't that where the Garden of Gethsemane is? I mean, I just see it
Mhm.
Right.
going on and on.
Wow. Y'all, here's some trivia. Since the 4th century AD, this valley is known as the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And from quite early times, it was a favorite Again, it points us to Kings in 2 Chronicles, and then it says, it is by Muslim and Jewish tradition the scene of the Last Judgment, and was known to Muslims in the Middle Ages as Wadi Sidi Miriam, I think, something like that. So.
I think Wadi, if I remember right, was another name for desert area.
Ah,
A wadi is a creek bed.
Oh, creek bed.
Right.
Okay.
This is valley.
yeah, and it's thought to be where King Joachim cast the body of the prophet Uriah. And some people think it's where Ezekiel had his vision of Valley of Dry Bones, but they said that's questionable.
That's very sad.
So it had a lot of tragedies there.
So do you think Yahweh has rejected David at this point?
It would
He
appear
goes
so.
goes into the wilderness and
No,
David's being
he's being
kind of
tested.
chased out, not chased out, but being out
I
into.
think he's being tested again. He's been sent back. Hey, go back where you started and regroup.
So is he maybe kind of teaching David to be king again?
Looks like
Mm-hmm. Hopefully. It kind of, when you look at our lives, when the nicer and more comfortable we are on this earth, it seems like it's easier to be farther away from God. You know, when you look at,
Take it
like,
for granted.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
and even in, when you look at different civilizations right now, just different cultures, Africa is where the church is like exploding. They live close to the land still. They are dependent on God. We've isolated ourselves so much from the natural world, and we give ourselves credit for everything because of technology, that it's easy for us to make ourselves God. It's much harder when you are living very close. I notice the difference just when we go to the country and stay for a week in East Texas, and it's slow, and you're right there outside a lot, and it's very different mentality than the hubbub of Houston, and we're busy with our important careers and, got to go to work because I'm so important, and it's easy.
That's only if you allow yourself to be that way.
Well, it's easier to let that creep
Do you
in.
think so? I don't. I really don't.
I think a lot of people don't get outside like they
I
used to.
do. I
When I go
think
down the
you-
street, there used to be people riding their bikes 10 years ago.
Yes.
And in the
Yeah.
parks,
That's
and
what
on
I'm
the
saying.
playground.
It's
People
easy
are
to
still doing
forget.
that.
And I
But
go
that's
down my
human
house now,
nature.
it's like totally vacant. Everybody's inside looking at their
But I think it's
phones.
true that they do it more they do it less in very affluential neighborhoods than they do in
I
less
live in
affluential.
Stonegate and they do it all the time.
I saw what you're talking about in the beginning when technology was first coming out, with the Ataris and all that.
Yes.
And there were some, weekends when I'd get home from work and I'd say to the boys, you've been on that thing all day, get outside, and I use my grandmother's phrase, go outside and blow the stink off yourself. But I'd have to put I learned a long time ago to curtail it, and then years later, I'm hearing parents or grandparents who are now raising their children, or their grandchildren, who are saying, well, I can't ground when they do that, and because they have TVs in their rooms, they have radios. I was lucky to have a transistor radio in my room when I was a kid. And to this day, when I had my own household, we only had one TV. And everybody learned to share. But anyway, the point is we have too many distractions. I didn't mean to digress, excuse me.
Well, Father Ricardo, and I don't know if y'all listened to him this morning, but he talks about that. He said, our problem is we are very distracted, and we don't spend enough time doing nothing. Like 20 minutes of
time with God.
wasting time with God. I thought, and at first I was appalled. What do you mean wasting time? And he says, well, time. When we say wasting time, that doesn't make any sense, because time is all we have. We live in time, and we only have so much time, and we don't waste it. You're spending it. Just be conscious of how you're spending it. So if you're putting your time in your God. So whatever you're spending the most time with, be careful that doesn't become your God. So.
Which when we were talking about hearts, immediately my thought was, where your heart is, there your treasure will be.
Yeah.
Because, wherever your heart is in your life, I mean, and you can be busy and you can be using technology and be thinking about God, and you can be riding your bike and
out in
Uh-huh.
wilderness and not be thinking
And
about
not think
God.
about God, yeah.
So, you know, it's just
Well,
that
yeah, in
conscious
fact, the Pope
awareness of always,
says-
you know, having, like, I've got more stuff on my smartphone about God. I've got the Bible, which one tell all of you that, and I'll tell you at the end of the class. But I've got all kinds of stuff on there that, you know, so if I'm looking at my phone, I might be reading a devotional for the day. So,
I would say the majority of my feed on Facebook, because of the cultivation of the friends that I have on Facebook, is Christian-based posts. Almost inevitably, it's either Christian-based or some stupid vintage thing. Like,
Yes.
vintage stuff. And so even the way you use social media isn't, I'm not saying technology is a bad thing, it's just what's your focus? What are you spending a lot of time on?
I think God uses that too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But I don't know if it was Father Ricardo, but at some point this week, there was a talk I was listening to, and it may have been him today, but he said, be careful that, us studying Aquinas, oh no, it was a blog I was reading. He said, even be careful that your religious practices don't become just another ego thing. Like, I love knowing, just for my own sake. You know, I love the fact that what I want to know is this, but it's still, the vulnerability is the ego. So getting off of Facebook every Lent, I realize how much my ego is vulnerable because getting off is hard. So.
All right, so let's look at 24 through 29.
And Abiathar came up, and lo, Zadok came also with all the Levites, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God until the people had all passed out of the city. Then the king said to Zadok, carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and let me see both it and his habitation. But if he says, I have no pleasure in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me what seems good to him. The king also said to Zadok the priest, look, go back to the city in peace, you and Abiathar, with your 2 sons, Ahimaaz and your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait at the fords of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. So Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there.
So why does everybody plus the ark go back to Jerusalem? Not everybody, but
Well,
the
Zadok
priests.
and Abiathar, these guys are priests, so that's where they belong, is in the temple.
The temple's not built yet.
Oh, right, okay, so they,
No temple yet.
okay, right.
They just have the
Right,
tabernacle.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. David wanted to build the temple.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
I'm
it
just-
hasn't
Another
quite
time
happened
here.
yet, so
But it's in a tent.
it's in a tent there. Where have we seen the ark carried out before?
It seems like it's best when you get God's permission first. because
Yeah.
God carried all around
Uh-huh.
Gath and those Philistine cities, people broke out with tumors and hemorrhoids
Oh,
and
yeah.
all kind of bad things happened.
When you said about the ark, I don't know why it just popped in my brain with Moses, after, they built it, it would go out before battle, and whenever it was present, then it seemed like they always won whatever battle it was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember
Yeah.
what verse or chapter or verse, but it just popped out.
Right, but it was either being led or they were followed by the angel of God. So they were obviously doing God's will each and every time they did something. Here, this is like where we studied last semester, where if you take the ark and do something with it and God hasn't directed the Israelites to do that, it's going to end bad. I see this actually is David's first kingly action in chapters.
To
I
send
mean,
it back.
finally, finally, he's doing the right thing. He's saying, no, I wasn't directed by God to take the ark out of the city. He said, place it there, and I haven't been given direction otherwise, so take it
Or
back.
have I asked permission?
Yeah, Nora.
And he could have stayed back to do penance while he sent everybody back. He could have been, because he said, I will
Well,
stay
yeah.
at the mouth of the Wadi, well, in the desert, and he may be doing penance. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe so. Or at least waiting to hear the
What
word of
God
the
might-
Lord. What does
Let
God
him
want from
Let
me?
him do to me what seems good to him. He's finally saying,
I'm placing
God's
myself
will.
back
God's
under
will.
God's will.
Right.
yeah.
Okay, and so if you think back to, people touching the ark when they weren't supposed to, and they died and so.
I felt sorry for the poor person. There was one of them, he didn't even intend to touch it. He just kind of brushed it and stabbed. He was dead. And I felt sorry for him,
Yeah, but it's.
because he didn't do it. I know, but he didn't do it out of being mean or malice or whatever. He just, for whatever reason, accidentally brushed up, and who knows, he could have stumbled.
Yeah, but
But it
we're
wasn't
supposed
supposed
to
to
be
be there
very holy,
anyway.
and we're supposed to be paying attention to where it is in proximity to ourselves, just like the Eucharist is holy, and,
That's
not,
what it
like,
was,
we don't take
okay.
God's name in vain, and we have to be, very careful.
Maybe if a couple of people got zapped like that, we'd go back to appreciate the Eucharist.
The earth opened up, and
I'm like, whoa!
Elizabeth said it was when it's gonna fall off the cart.
Yeah.
Right. And the guy tried to catch it. It's
Oh,
such
yes.
an instinct in all of us. If something's gonna fall, we instinctively
Yeah.
reach out, so Elizabeth was right.
But should it have been on the cart to begin with?
No.
Remember, there was a specific
Yeah.
way to carry it.
To carry
They
it,
couldn't,
yeah.
even the priest couldn't touch it, they had to touch the pole.
The
There were
pole.
The
poles
poles for
involved.
it, yeah.
Even the priest couldn't touch it, everybody knew this was like supremely holy, this is God's. So
And,
it wasn't-
were they really supposed to have moved it to begin with, and
Yeah.
so they, I agree, it seems like,
seemed
he was
awful.
only trying to do what was
But he's
right, not to let
defying,
it touch
but he's
the
defying
ground.
God.
Because I'm sure what ran through that person's mind was, oh no, it's God, this is the tabernacle, it's gonna fall, I gotta see it. In just that split second, and also in the next split second, you're like, you're gone.
Yeah.
So, to me, that felt harsh.
It's making those split
Well, as
second
God said to
decisions.
Job, who are we? Who are you? To question anything I decide.
I wanna fall on the ground, fall on the ground.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if the guy had not touched it and it had started to actually fall, if God would have miraculously kept it from hitting the ground.
Oh.
I don't know.
No, that's interesting.
Would that have happened and that been more
Who
proof
knows?
to the presence of God in that time? So, okay, something you can what if to death, right? Okay. All right. So let's look at the last, I guess it's not quite the last couple verses here, but how about 30 and 31?
As David went up the Mount of Olives, he wept without ceasing. His head was covered and he was walking barefoot. All those who were with him also had their heads covered and were weeping as they went. When David was informed that
Abiathar.
Abiathar was among the conspirators with Absalom, he said, O Lord, turn the counsel of to folly. I'm sorry. I'd have to hear,
A, just call him A.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Turn the
in front of mine, it says rebellion at Absalom, and it was just talking about the part where Absalom was out in pursuit of David, his father, out in pursuit of his father, and David stands ready to meet him. There's something about barefoot I saw here. I can't find it right now.
Well,
I'm sorry.
He
In
wept,
30.
his head was covered, he was barefoot.
Walking
What are
barefoot.
These are symbols of what?
Morning.
Morning, yeah.
you think David's mourning?
The death of his sons. Because Absalom, I think, isn't this the point where Absalom was killed?
No,
Not yet.
not yet.
No, not yet. A little bit
He's-
further on.
No, but he's mourning all sorts of stuff. He's
Yeah.
mourning his own screw ups.
Say mourning his.
He's mourning the fact
His
that
sons
now
turned
he's
out.
losing another son.
I found it.
He's mourning all his.
And he, pity party.
Yeah.
Separation
His
from
kingdom.
Separation from
Lost- Losing his kingdom.
Right.
Okay, when he hears of Absalom's rebellion, David flees Jerusalem barefoot and weeping in a procession that resembles a penitential rite. So that's just exactly what you were talking about.
And how did he come into Jerusalem? I mean, I keep looking at the,
No,
You know,
dancing,
look at the
joy,
contrast
joyous,
here.
just ecstatic.
you know,
And now he's more like death. You know, getting back to the ark and who has the ark, when you take the ark out to use for your purposes, you've turned it into a superstition. Like whoever has the ark is king. So by putting the ark back, he's saying God's deciding who is going to have the ark. So it's, you know, again, we all are at risk of doing that daily, is manipulating and making God something we want him to be. Or, you know, even in our prayers, you have to be careful how you're praying. Like if we're always just asking for stuff, you know, it's like, okay, I've done all this good stuff, now I need my reward, you know.
And don't make bargains.
Yeah. So it just keeps striking me that he sends, how humbling to send that back, to say, no, I don't really own that. That's not, you know, yes, I'm king and he appointed me king, but God's going to decide this. I'm to go to battle, but God's going to decide who wins. Just like Joshua, I'm going into the battle totally overwhelmed with the other side, but God's decided the outcome of this.
and remember at one point in time, we talked about the ark seemingly being used as a good luck charm.
Yeah.
You know, and
And
so
that's
I
when
think
people
David's
die.
saying, we don't need that, we're gonna let God decide, so send it back where it belongs. So, the 8th question here says, compare and contrast David going to the Mount of Olives to Jesus going to the Mount of Olives, or in the Garden of Gethsemane after the Last Supper. And there's a section in Matthew where, just to refresh your memories, I put those verses in there. Jesus was in the garden. Were there any similarities? Do we want to read that, so we refresh your memories as to what? Matthew 26:30.
And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter declared to him, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." And Jesus said to him, "Truly I say to you, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, "Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you." And so said all the disciples. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go yonder and pray." And taking with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt." And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, for the 2nd time, he went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, thy will be done." And because he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prepared for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." You want me to keep going? While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I shall kiss is the man. Seize him." And he came up to Jesus at once and said, "Hail, Master!" And he kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, why are you here?" Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into the place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must be so?"
That's good.
Keep
I think
going.
that's,
Okay,
I think
that was
that's
it,
fine.
yeah.
I mean, we all kind of know the story,
Right,
but just
right.
refresh our memories to, you know, some of the similarities that were going on here. What do you see that was similar?
He was mourning, he was crying, he was very deeply sad, sweating blood.
Mm-hmm.
Have we really seen Jesus be in this state before?
Probably the closest would be the 40 days in the desert, where he's really battling. He's first been given his commission at the Jordan, and then he's 40 days in communion with God, but also tempted by the devil. So he's back in the garden. I love how that movie, The Passion of the Christ, visually puts the devil in the garden with him, makes it very obvious that he's battling that final temptation, because if he asked his Father, if he had asked another way, "Hey, take this from me, but not thy will be done," he's God, it would have happened. So, well, obviously they're retreating, and David's retreating. So, and Jesus is preparing for the final battle, and so is David for the kingdom. And Jesus will save the kingdom, and David, through obedience to God, will save the kingdom. So that's kind of the similarities I saw.
I hadn't noticed the betrayal comparison until that reading,
So where do you see the betrayal?
with the counselor and Judas, and the fact that David had been betrayed and as had Jesus. Very interesting.
And he was betrayed by a loved one. I mean, he loved
His
Judas.
love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And both came at the end, toward the end of the passages. And like that, and on top of everything else.
Betrayed by somebody I should be able to trust.
Jesus says, "Take this cup if it's your will," and David says, "Oh Lord, I pray that you turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." So they both would like for them not to have this happen if it's possible. Well, when Jesus originally came into Jerusalem, he was greeted with palm branches. And
Oh,
here,
that's
they
true.
came in dancing with the ark, so they both came in joyously.
Uh-huh.
Getting ready to. I just thought it was pretty striking, though, that they, just even the verses where they talked about him, you know, weeping and the mourning situation, and that they were going to be, you know, Jesus basically is redeemed for us, so is David redeemed in this situation? We may have to wait till the end
Yeah.
of this section to really answer that question. And one of the other places that the Mount of Olives was mentioned is in a prophecy that's in Zechariah, and it just was kind of striking to me there, because we were talking about David's bare feet at this point, and it says in Zechariah 14:4, And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east and west. And there shall be a great valley, and half the mountain shall remove toward the north and half toward the south. So, that's the return of Jesus to establish his,
The
kingdom on earth.
kingdom. It's interesting that that tradition is with Muslims and Jews that this will be the place of the final judgment too. So we could see that as Jesus' first coming and also his last. I wonder if we.
The Alpha, the Omega, beginning, the end. Interesting.
You gotta know, it's gotta be in that area of the world because it's been in constant turmoil since the very beginning.
It always has been.
I mean, that's what we assume. I'm sure we can't.
No, but think
Can't
about,
be so arrogant to be sure.
is it all Abraham's fault for having, or
Yeah.
actually Sarah's
Sarah,
fault?
Sarah, yeah, for doubting God. Yeah,
Yeah, it
this
does
is,
go back,
She
you're right.
wondered. That's where it
what,
Was there disobedience there at that point, to,
Yeah.
because it,
Like the Garden of Eden. She laughed.
oh, I'm sure if Abraham hadn't screwed it up, we would have had somebody else do it. Too much count on that.
She laughed. She not only was disobedient, she laughed at God. He said she's
yes, she laughed, and also Abraham laughed, Abram laughed, so. All right, any other thoughts on Mount Olives, or? Notice it is also a high place. Jesus went to a high place. We always see, communion with God in the Bible. It seems to take place in a high place. Ahithophel. Ahithophel was a cherished and esteemed companion of David. They really enjoyed a close friendship. And but the tie back with Ahithophel is that Bathsheba was his granddaughter.
Oh.
Possibly, we're not sure.
Well, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. But looking, let's see if I have the reference to that. But going back there, that there were, close men with David, and so possibly if you trace that family line, supposedly Bathsheba could have
But he
been.
was the most gifted of David's wives.
Right.
And
But, is this, all of a sudden Absalom raises his head and he's going to say, aha, here's my chance, to somewhat revenge David.
they don't know why. Why did he go to Absalom?
And when you say gifted
You
like
know.
that, it makes me think of Satan, the most gifted angel.
Well, think about when Satan tests us the most.
He makes us how we're ready for what.
When we are at our lowest, he will come.
And David was definitely at his lowest.
So, I don't know. To me, I would, if Bathsheba were my granddaughter and David had done something to hurt her.
What did he do to hurt her? I'm
he-
just-
Well,
innocent
Bathsheba,
Well,
Yeah.
Killed her husband.
Yeah, right, but he took her in, he gave her another son.
Well, he killed her husband.
Yeah.
yeah, but why did he
acted
take
out of
her?
lust.
For his own,
Did-
so.
I don't remember that, yeah, but it seemed as though she loved him, and I guess all along I never thought for sure that
Did
she
she?
knew that he
Yeah.
had killed her.
Did she love him?
She wanted him, that's a good
Why
question.
did she want him?
Because he was powerful and he was the king. But did she love him? And she did lose her son as a result of his actions, and that was probably.
Our perfect God took care of everything.
Okay, I understand.
I don't know, you know, it's just,
That's my opinion.
It doesn't ever say in scripture that she loves him, does it?
The Bible
That's
never
right.
says what women think or feel.
Well, I mean, we don't know, I mean,
We don't know.
you know, I thought the consensus was she went to him because
He
when the
was
king
the
calls, you go.
right.
I was gonna say powerful, handsome men are attractive. I think it's easy to fall in love with a powerful, handsome man.
But
And
she's
then-
already married.
And what is
How
that?
much
And she had a powerful husband, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, he
Uriah
was
was,
the general,
David-
wasn't he, of the army?
David
Yes.
took care of that.
Yeah.
So,
you know,
Well, it says that this, Ahithophel had the character that, the other men were lacking because he recognized that his granddaughter had been wrong, but he went in the wrong direction. He went against the king. Isn't that weird?
well, but again, I think our, you know, if it's family and your family gets hurt by somebody, I mean, how many times, I mean, my husband, when he hears the evening news and, you know, somebody's, you know, hurt their kid, he says, I don't understand how people can do that, you know,
And
and
yet
so,
when David's daughter
You know.
was hurt, you know, he didn't step up.
you know, somebody did that to my daughter, you know, don't hold me back, you know, I'm gonna get my pistol, you know, you know, this kind of thing. You know, we just, we lose sight of, what's right and wrong sometimes because of our love for our family or for people, you know, so, I don't know. Anyway. So, let's finish this out then, 32 to 37.
When David reached the top where God was worshipped, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him with garments torn and dirt upon his head. David said to him, "If you come with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, 'Let me be your servant, O king. I was formerly your father's servant, but now I will be yours,' you will thwart for me the counsel of Ahithophel. You will have the priests Zadok and Abiathar there with you. If you hear anything from the king's house, you shall report it to the priests, Zadok and Abiathar, who have there with them their two sons, Zadok's son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan. Through them you shall send on to me whatever you hear." So David's friend Hushai went into the city, Jerusalem, as Absalom was about to enter.
So another reason for sending Zadok and Abiathar back?
it's almost like a spy again.
Is it a little bit ironic that all of a sudden Hushai shows up at the time right after David says, can we have Absalom's counsel become foolish? Is this answer to David's prayer maybe, that another trusted person has come to help him and ask him to pledge allegiance to Absalom?
Well, his name doesn't sound very promising, quick or haste. It says, you wrote here, Hushai means quick or haste. I felt better if it said, you know, trusted.
Maybe he came to the aid of David quickly. He may have come in haste to aid David.
Yeah, save the day, you know, Johnny on the spot here.
So I'm confused, is he acting kingly? Is he not leaving everything alone so God can just do his work? Is he, you know, injecting himself into the situation? you know, I guess I'm just thinking it'll probably unravel itself as time goes on.
You know, sometimes you give them enough rope to hang themselves.
Well, what does he say there? Somewhere he says, like in 35, thou shalt hear out of the king's house and tell it to Zadok and Abiathar. So is he thinking that Absalom is, going to enter into his David's palace where he left the 10 concubines? And, he sent the priests and their sons back, and they're now going to act as spies in that case.
Because when Absalom comes back, see them still there, and it goes, oh, you didn't follow David out, so you must be on my side.
And he's having Hushai pledge allegiance to Absalom. White lies, I don't know. And Absalom comes into Jerusalem, compared to David coming into Jerusalem.
Seems like he's sneaking back here.
He's sneaky. No pomp and circumstance. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on 15? Thankfully, Lynn didn't give me something, she gave me the concrete stuff to work with here.
Oh, you did awesome, Nancy. I don't think we stayed too concrete, though.
And she also wanted us to look at Psalm 3. So if you can flip over to Psalm 3. This is a psalm that was supposedly written by David when he fled from Absalom, his son.
We read this back in April. Well, I have a date on my,
Oh, do you?
I keep the dates on my Bibles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember why we did.
Okay. It's not a long psalm. Some of our psalms are, many verses long, but this is only 8 verses. And one of the commentaries that I read had broken it down into David finds himself in distress in the first 2 verses and recognizes God's help and protection in the next 2 verses, and then has confidence in the midst of danger in the next 2, and then his last one is a prayer for deliverance and a cry for blessing. So kind of keep that in mind. And a couple places in mine it had the word Salah, which I never remember what that means, and so I had to go back and look it up the 100th time, and that was to pause or to praise or to lift up.
Thank you.
It just depends on how it fits in the translation. So.
This is why God loves David. Even when he acts bad, he's still out there praying to the Lord, writing songs.
He repents so quickly.
Does he repent quickly all the time?
Usually I say.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, this is a grown son, and the adultery and all that deceit occurred before this child was even born, so I'm assuming. So no, not always. Or he repented, but he didn't fully repent.
Okay, so let's look at the first 2 verses with respect to David's distress. Somebody want to read those first 2?
How many are my foes, Lord? How many rise against me?
One more?
One more,
Oh,
maybe
okay,
2.
mine are numbered different.
Okay, I'm sorry.
How many say to me, God will not save that one? But you, Lord, are a shield around me.
Okay, let's stop there.
Okay.
Just the first 2 are, okay, so, and at the end of 2, mine has Salah there, so to pause or to praise or to lift up. So, is he in distress?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no help for him in God. That's pretty bad.
Is he feeling a little bit sorry for himself?
Yeah, they're all out to get me, God.
Yeah.
They are.
many there be say of my soul, there is no help for him in God. So even the people are saying that?
That's what he says, that he's feeling betrayed, right?
I think so. All right. The next two verses, these are referring to recognizing God's help and protection. 3 and 4, I don't know.
But thou, O Lord, art a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cry aloud to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy hill.
And mine has another Salah at the end of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, when it said shield there, I immediately thought about David and Goliath and his shield. Did he take Saul's armor?
No.
No.
He didn't take Saul's
No.
armor. And I had to go back and review the story because I couldn't remember exactly what had happened there. And so it says that Goliath's shield bearer went before Goliath. You know, that, and so if David is crying out to God here, recognizing God's help and protection, is he saying, okay, God, I'm ready for you to be my shield again. I'm ready for you to,
He's going back
be
to
my
that.
defense.
Mhm.
And so I thought it was kind of interesting that, during that warring time with David and Goliath, that Goliath had the physical world behind him. He had the person that was the shield bearer before him, and David had God before him as his shield. So. And there were a couple other places I just looked up about shields, so you can take a look at those a little bit later if you want. Okay, and then the next couple verses there, 3, 5, and 6.
Whenever I lay down and slept, the Lord preserved me to rise again. I do not fear then. Thousands of people arrayed against me on every side.
Okay.
When you were just talking, not about Goliath, but I just happened to think when Saul was after David, wasn't there some point when Saul's army was kind of had David surrounded, but yet David was able to go away, I think when they were asleep or something like that. It just,
Or when his army was in the cave,
Yeah.
and Saul goes in to go to the bathroom, and doesn't even see him.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and Jesus does that through crowds, like they're trying to push him
Passes
off the
through.
cliff, and suddenly he just is able to pass through. So it's the hint of it's God's divine providence, will, timing, God's timing, I guess.
I also thought when it said that in verse 6, I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me. Do you remember when
The women were
singing that song that Saul had defeated his thousands and David his 10,000s?
Oh, yes.
So that was back in, again, I had to go look it up. I couldn't remember. I don't
Yeah.
have the photographic memory that Lynn has, but
Ask her.
No, I don't know where it is.
well,
She
I think
remembers every time you say something. She's like, "Yep."
Well, I think it's first.
I know.
1 Samuel 18:41, I think, is what I had. Wait, there's no 18:41. Is it?
for Samuel, what, 18 you said?
Yeah.
It was
Let's-
1814.
No,
He must have been reflecting on the fact that, here I come into Jerusalem a few years ago, all joyful. I've got all these thousands of people just worshiping
18:7.
and
18:7.
praising me.
Glorifying,
And
yeah.
now these same 10,000 are all
Yeah,
against me.
yes.
It's the whim, how mercurial people's attitudes are and how
What
quickly,
have you done for me lately?
yeah, how quickly they can turn on you. So you can't rely on popularity to last.
Yeah, correct that. It's Michelle found it. It's 1 Samuel 18:7. And the women answered one another as they played, and Saul hath slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. So, okay, and let's finish this out then. That leaves us with 7 and 8. Or 8, 9, okay, mine, okay, whatever,
Mine's
Isn't
7,
that
8.
weird how they have each one?
Yeah, mine's 7, 8
numbered
too.
differently?
okay.
Yeah.
Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for thou hast smitten all mine enemies upon the cheekbone. Thou hast broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy people. Selah.
I have Salah as a term in general consideration, a direction to the cantor or musician. That's what my commentary says at the bottom. It says its exact meaning is not known.
Huh.
But it does occur 71 times in Psalm 39.
But that meaning to pause she has fits right in.
Yeah,
Right,
to
the
pause.
pause.
Yeah.
After sing
The
this and
pause.
then pause for effect.
Right.
Right.
And
The
maybe
director
during
would
that
say,
pause time,
"Breathe."
they're praising or they're
Right.
lifting up or something like that.
An amen or something might be in the middle, or I don't know.
Well, or when we sing the Psalms at church, the cantor sings our refrain, then we sing it, then he sings the paragraph, and then we sing the refrain again. So, they're meant to be sung.
Yeah, before you came in, I was wondering, what kind of music did they put towards this? I know what we do.
I
What kind
know.
of
Wouldn't it be
music did they
neat
put
to
towards
hear
it?
that? Yeah.
Would be,
I
We
wonder
had
if that's
timbrels
completely
back in,
lost.
The women singing the song originally, we had timbrels, songs of joy and instruments of music, and then triangles or three-stringed instruments is my footnote for instruments of music.
yeah, probably the harp or the lyre or whatever.
Right.
Interesting.
Think about, wasn't Miriam with a tambourine or something
yeah,
that would have been
dancing with the-
similar to, something that would be similar to our
Mhm.
modern day tambourine. So if you look at some of the verbs in there, Lynn has taught us to look at verbs, but arise, okay, so is he kind of turning himself around here, David?
Mhm.
Arise, O Lord, save me. He's remembering that, God had smitten all of his enemies before. I thought of Samson when it talks about the cheekbone and the broken teeth and things, but again, the commentary said that when you break the teeth, you render somebody powerless. I thought, well, they couldn't eat, and therefore they would get weak, and
Probably in great pain, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, ouch.
Mm.
and punishment of the wicked in that last portion. And then this was not commentary, this was Gospel according to Nancy, and I was thinking, okay, we have 8 verses here. 8 is, that new creation or something, and
yes.
so it says, salvation belongs to the Lord, thy blessing is upon thy people. So as he kind of renewed himself and become confident,
Become king again.
again or something at that point. So I have, ladies.
That's great.
Wonderful.
Cool, thank you.
Also, if you did get the email I had sent, a couple of you had asked me about chiastic structures, and so since this one,
You got it.
in my studies, we're talking about chiasms or chiastic structures. I found a little bit of background information that I included, and then there was a chiastic structure in 2 Samuel 15:12 through 31, and I'm not, you all can read and you can go back and look at that, but some of you had asked about
Thank you.
how to spot that with the bookends and things. So some of the commentaries that I use sometimes will point those out, and sometimes Lynn has a whole book of those, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to collect some of those ideas, like looking for verbs is one, and then the chiastic structure is another, and
Counting how many times a word appears.
Oh,
There's just so
yeah.
many.
if anybody else thinks of any, email them out to us, because I'd really like to start looking for that. I love it when y'all do it here, but I never think to do it.
So,
That's why we're all meant to come together.
Yes.
yeah. Well, I thank all of you to be here and the help that you gave in putting all this together, all the sharing, so. I'm gonna have somebody lead closing prayer. No, you don't have to put him on the spot.
Poor Steve.
You always put the